is up?
What is up? What is up?
It's a beautiful day.
Yeah. We are alive. It's cooler. Thank the Lord. Man, it was been hot. I know you and I were just chatting about that. It's stupid hot.
Yeah, well, we were supposed to shoot this the other day, and I had to call it off. I'm like, dude, it is so hot in my apartment, like absurdly hot.
Yeah.
So I think from now on, probably mornings are going to be smart for us during the summertime.
Yeah, it makes more sense, especially in an apartment where you don't have really hardly any AC at all.
Oh, no, I have zero AC. I've got windows. Yeah. And all they do is let hot air in.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like a first world problem, but man, it was brutal here last week, especially getting the AC fixed. Like, we're just sitting in the house.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
In a pool of sweat and filth. It was awful.
I know what that's like.
Awful. Mm-hmm.
And my freezer in my kitchen is so small, especially because, like, again, another like weird, maybe unrelatable problem. But Zeke, my dog, won't eat normal dog food. So we've got him on Farmer's Dog, like that raw food stuff.
Right.
The problem is it comes to you frozen and it needs to stay frozen until it's ready to be thawed and fed. So almost our entire freezer is packed with dog food every day. So we don't even have room for like bags of ice.
Right.
So I wish I could show you. It's back there in the kitchen, like sitting in the middle of my kitchen is an igloo. What do they call those? Like a ice, I'm blanking on it.
Like a little
like
cooler?
An ice chest.
Yeah.
Yeah. We went to Target and got a little one that'll keep ice for like a day if you're lucky.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so we just go like every couple of days, go buy a bag of ice, put it in the little igloo. And we make our drinks and stuff, our iced tea or whatever to try to stay cool.
I can see Michaela coming home.
The problem quickly
just saying like your head is in there like a pelican or not a pelican, but a flamingo. Like your whole head is. Yeah. Ostrich.
Flamingo. Yeah.
Yeah. Whatever that stupid bird is. Your whole head is just buried in it, ass up in the air.
Yeah.
Head inside the, just buried in the ice. Yeah.
Well, that was me the other night. I'm sitting in front of the fridge looking in there and Michaela's like, oh, sorry, I need to get in there. I'm like, it's all right. I'm just using it as AC right now. Just,
do you want to come join?
Probably ruining all of our food.
Yeah, you're just standing there, both of you.
Just sit here for a minute.
Yeah.
I just need like 2 minutes to pretend that I remember what it's like to be chilly.
Well, at least you got the truck.
God.
Now you can go sit in there. That's also something I ended up doing.
And I've had to do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. On some of those days, man, it's like just go out there and get 20 minutes of driving around the block and some reprieve from all the heat,
Oh yeah, totally.
Crazy.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, I know you and I have talked a lot about this particular episode, and I was really excited about this one. We initially talked about, and we've jokingly talked about this quite a bit because we both have had our own opinions about the Black Album from Metallica. And often when we were talking about this whole podcast, I said in one of the ideas that we wrote down, I was like, maybe we do something where it's Rust in Peace from Megadeth versus the Black Album, and thinking about, what's more influential, what holds up still, what do metal fans really think of these records, both then at their moment in time when they first encountered those albums, and what do they think about them now? I think for many, many years planted the flag that I just absolutely couldn't stand the Black Album. And I've come around as I've gotten older to appreciate what they did and why they did it.
That's probably spoken like someone from your generation, though.
Yeah, I think so. Because I really did love their first 4 albums. And it was really hard. Yeah. It was a pretty big departure from that. So... But then it kind of occurred to me as I was doing a little bit of research around those 2 records. Of course, they didn't necessarily come out in the exact same year. They came out about 12 months apart, or just shy of 12 months apart from one another. But then I also realized that there were 2 other pretty influential albums that came out for metal fans or just hard rock in general. And that was Pantera's Cowboys from Hell and Slayer's Seasons in the Abyss. Mm-hmm. And I thought, man, these are 4 records that I know.
90 to 91.
That was a good time. Hot year. And you have 4 incredibly influential bands specific in those genres.
And Hansel's so hot right now.
No. Slayer's so hot right now.
Sorry, I can't help it.
Yeah. But they many consider, in whatever camp you may fall, or if all of the camps, right, consider those 4 records to be the apex for a lot of their work. And so I thought it'd be fun to kind of talk through our own way of discovery for those albums, because I know we've all listened to those albums over the course of our life, and maybe just talk about how they hold up now, what you find to be your favorite. I honestly want to know, of guitar players, for you, like how would you rank the guitar players in these bands on your favorite? Like,
that's not even a question, Kev. There is only Marty.
There's only Marty.
There's only Marty.
But you're putting,
there's only Marty.
You got Darrell. I mean, so anyway, we can get to that.
That's true. Yeah, I forgot that we're talking about Pantera too. Yeah, that does make it tougher.
Yeah,
I mean, clearly every one of those records has amazing guitar work on it. Yeah. From every band, like there's no question. But I think for me, Marty is the one who is like, I don't know, but Dime is like that too. Mm-hmm. Dime always feels like the metal Eddie Van Halen, which is so cool to me. Like the way that he plays has that same sort of freedom and reckless abandon, but it's always somehow perfect, you know, which I think is amazing. But Marty, his work with Megadeth is, I guess I never heard anyone play like Dime either, but I think Marty's work is the one that feels the most foreign. Like when I hear Dime, I feel like I hear vocabulary that I'm kind of familiar with. That's not to say that he sounds like other people, or that, you know, that he doesn't have a unique sound, because, you know, that would be false. Yeah. But Marty's work always seemed like I just never knew what to expect from what he was going to play. And I always thought that was really cool.
I think about that because you think about,
of course, metal. That's looking at more from a lead perspective, but you know,
true. But I also thought we talked about this too, which I think Jeff Hanneman and Kerry King kind of fall into when we think about metal solos. And I'll say prior to even these 4 records as well, it was always this sort of wild abandon chromatic kind of thing that was just screechy and loud.
The notes didn't matter.
Yeah, it didn't matter as much
as the feeling matters. Yeah. It was more about creating chaos and tension, which is how I played a lot. Like when I was coming up, like high school metal bands, trying to write a solo, that was pretty much all I tried to do, was that kind of solo.
Right.
It's like, how can I just create mayhem in this section? It doesn't even have to be that good. It just needs to make you feel like, woo. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Almost a sense of unease.
Which I don't know if that's what those guys were thinking about, but that's how I felt about it.
Yeah. So I think in seeing them now, and that's what when you mention Marty, and certainly Dimebag as well, I think both of them sort of brought this sort of technical finesse, but also their own very unique voice to that. But I agree. Like when I first heard Rust in Peace, I'm hearing the solos on those records, and by that point I kind of knew Dave's style, because he also he needs to be part of this equation if you're thinking about soloists, because he is a lead player as well, aside from the fact that he can write riffs for days.
Very underrated too.
Very underrated in his ability to play lead, right? And then people, again, because he has always had such virtuosic guitar players in his band, people often forget that he himself is also a great lead player. But I was used to sort of how his style is, which is exactly kind of what we're talking about. This sort of screechy, chromatic things that'll often metal that was associated with a metal solo.
Yeah.
But the first time I hear
bass stuff in there too.
Yeah.
Like kind of blues meets chaos at times. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But the first time I hear like Holy Wars or Hangar 18 and I hear the solos in that, I'm like, whoa.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa. What is this? You know, it was quite a bit different. And similarly, again, thinking about like Cowboys from Hell, Art of Shredding, some of these songs, like they are incredibly focused and have a really unique approach over metal heavy riffs.
Yeah.
You know, I know I'm not talking about Kirk, and
definitely,
I know we'll get to that too, but he also has his thing, and there's certainly a voice to him as well that has often been parodied. I will still be guilty of saying that. I'm not an enormous fan.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll get a lot of people to disagree or agree. It's very controversial talking about Kirk Hammett, but again, look, who am I to critique? He's been doing this for a long time. It's his voice. It's how he chooses to play. I'm not necessarily a fan of it.
If Metallica doesn't become... Yeah. Well, I think if Metallica doesn't become Metallica, they don't become the biggest band, you know, maybe of all time, then I think there's probably not as much scrutiny over his playing.
Yeah. Potentially.
I have a similar feeling to you at this point. You know, I like early Kirk stuff, and I don't know if there was and I mean, I'm just pulling stuff out of my ass at this point, but I don't know if maybe the influence of Cliff in the band helps support Kirk's ideas a little bit more.
Yeah.
It feels like in the later work, it probably isn't improv, but it has that feeling of just sort of improvised solos. Whereas I'm thinking about earlier Metallica, it felt like in a lot of those songs there was more like they were, I don't know if crafted is the right word, but there was a little more composition perhaps in the solos. I think about, like, you know, we've talked about Fade to Black before. If I'm remembering right, that was the first Metallica song that I ever heard. I mean, that song has great guitar solos in it. And really beautiful parts. So you have like the Master of Puppets solo, you know, really like beautiful harmony, and it's melodic, and then gets into the real chaotic stuff. And that's some of what I miss with more modern Metallica, is a little more of that melody that I don't feel they lean into quite as much guitar wise. But yeah, Kirk will always have a special place for me, but he's also a player that I feel like my taste have evolved beyond a little bit with a lot of the stuff that they put out more recently. Yeah. But damn, they're still a great band. There's no doubt about that.
No doubt. No. And that, I think that was
seeing them last year was amazing.
Yeah. To know that they've been able to do that for 40 years in their career, I think for any of them, to be very honest, and I know obviously with the passing of the brothers in Pantera, that's a different thing, but even being able to see sort of a re-evolution of that, and having those two, Charlie and Zach, just kind of stepping in and trying to really recreate faithfully as much as they could the sound of Pantera with the other two remaining members. I still think that's a beautiful homage to them, without necessarily being mimicry, if you will, but just a great way to tip their hat to people that they obviously loved and admired, you know. Think about not to shift gears at all, but I'm thinking, let's go back to, I'm assuming for you, Black Album would have been the first iteration of all of those four, your first sort of introduction to them. Yeah.
Definitely.
So tell me a little bit about how did that come to be?
Well, I don't know if the Black Album specifically, but Metallica was my first of those four bands. if that makes sense. But yeah, this goes to back to a story that I shared on one of our earlier episodes, so I'll keep it short. But when I was a freshman, there was a kid who went to the, like, I forget what you call it. It's like one of those, the bad kid school next to the good kid school. Like when you get in trouble too many times and they say, fine, this is your last shot before you're out of the system. There was this guy named Cricket. Still don't know his real name.
That's
amazing. Probably never will.
His name is Cricket. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. It feels so extra funny to me now, having seen Sunny. It's always sunny in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Shout out to Cricket.
Because, there are some parallels there a little bit. But anyway, he was like a punk rock kid, way taller than me. And he was, I thought he was a really cool guy.
Yeah.
And we're hanging out one day and he gives me a mix CD that has, I had no idea what was even on it. Like there was no track list. So I'm discovering these bands with having no idea who they even are, and then having to circle back with him and find him and be like, dude, who is it? What is this? And there was Fade to Black was on there. I'm pretty sure Enter Sandman was on there. There was Ozzy, Mama, I'm Coming Home.
Oh, wow.
For some reason.
Okay.
You had Santeria from Sublime. You had, I forget, there was a handful of others, but that was my introduction into Metallica. I remember Fade to Black came on, and I was kind of famous for this anyway, but I never paid attention in class, hardly ever, if I could get away with it. And so I remember being in my history class, social studies, whatever it was, in freshman year. That was probably like American or world history, maybe. Yeah, I think world history. And so most of the time I'd be in the back of the class with this is back when I would carry a Discman. I had a Sony portable, Discman player.
Oh yeah.
And some of those wraparound headphones, so they didn't mess up my hair. That was important.
You had to have that. Yeah.
So they were the kind that like hook over the ear and then wrap around the back instead of going on the top. And I'd just be in class listening to music. And I remember finding that song, and it probably did not leave repeat for weeks, I would think. Like,
wow.
It felt like drugs to me. Like I would basically hallucinate listening to this song. It was so cool. I never heard anything like it before.
Right.
So that was my way of kind of stepping in and finding Metallica. And then kind of realizing like, oh, some of these songs, I didn't know who the band was or that all of these songs were from that band, but I did start to piece some things together. I remember, I don't even know how I got into it, but there's a real deep cut that I think was part of Mission Impossible 2 or something like that, that they did called I Disappear. Yeah. I go back every once in a while and check that. It's still a really cool song.
Yeah.
It came out during a period with that band where people weren't super high on Metallica. So it gets glossed over, and it was a movie soundtrack song. But that's a cool track. I remember that one being big for me around that time too. Yeah. Because this is still during the days of LimeWire. I didn't have Metallica at home. Yeah. And I didn't have any friends that I knew of who had any of this kind of stuff. So, you're going on there searching LimeWire or wherever, trying to download whatever you can find. And I was completely oblivious to Lars' whole Napster.
Lars is going to come to your house and kick your ass right now.
So yeah. I bought enough of the records now. Hopefully he'll give me a pass.
Yeah, we paid
But I was
back.
just a kid trying to get it however I could,
Yeah, absolutely. Did you?
How did you hear Metallica?
Oh, wow. I think it's through the same sort of way. I think high school, certainly we're talking, my high school year is probably from 86 to 90, something like that, or 87 to 90. Yeah. So I'm still in the hard rock, hair metal bands that were out and just blowing up MTV. And I'm kind of absorbing anything and everything that I feel like I could get. But I think there was also a natural sort of exhaustion of hair metal for me, where I'm like, it feels like the same thing over and over.
Totally.
You know, not to speak about, because I still love quite a bit of those bands, but I think at a point it started feeling more like a record label was telling them, you're going to release a ballad, you're going to release this kind of party song, you're going to release this thing.
Yeah.
And it just all started to feel very homogenized to me. So I'm like,
but isn't that what happens, right?
Yeah. With any
something
good thing.
gets popular, and then the business side is to figure out how to make money with it, you know? And so you start seeing so much of
the heydays of A&R, right? I think this is still where they're really actively chasing the next whomever. So for me, I just wanted to get another layer down in the subway, and I'm like, okay, I'm looking for something else to be a bit more exciting. I think what probably started it, and I could be wrong, I'll be fuzzy about this, but I think I saw the one video on MTV. And I was like,
so you got in on Injustice.
Yeah. I would say that's fair. I'm not going to be one to go and claim that I had Kill 'Em All and Master and all that stuff initially. I'm not doing that. Yeah. I don't think that's true. I think I probably came into Metallica earnestly through seeing the one video and then going, wow, this is incredible. I wanted to get that record, so I'm pretty sure I bought that album. And I think I feel like I bought the two of that album and Master Puppets together. So I basically had a double shot. Combo. Yeah, a double shot of two of those albums. Of course, they were on at that point, and Justice for All is kind of, you know, they're getting a little bit of that MTV push because of the one video. So I started really listening to that record a lot, and then going back and listening to Master of Puppets as well. So those two albums are on repeat for a long time. And then I think over that time, of course, my friends, people that I was hanging out with a lot, we were all kind of in the same place. We would all just sort of pass music around. And they're like, I said, hey, you got to check this record out. And they would go listen to it. And they're like, hey, well, did you get Ride the Lightning? And I'm like, no, I haven't heard that yet. Then I see a kid at school with the shirt, you know, the album cover. I'm like, okay, I have to, you know. So as you're learning and having new friends, and you're starting to change,
and that
sort
is
of
my
your
favorite
course.
Metallica record. Ride the Lightning.
It's a great record. Yeah, that's a great album.
Yeah, it's my favorite.
I think I listened to all of them then, kind of in that same year that Injustice came out, and just sort of absorbed all of it. So I was way into the band, but it all kind of came as a flood. Really starting from the one video, and I went backwards, and I just listened to all of it really at the same time. And of course, I'm eagerly anticipating what's going to come next, but they unlocked a door for me. And, you know, I've always loved heavier stuff, but I would be remiss if I didn't say, I think they unlocked the door for me to listen to metal bands, thrash metal bands in general. So once I realized, okay, I have a love of this, I want to know more. Who are other artists out here that kind of are doing the same thing? That opened the door for me. And I think with any of us, I'm also one I love to do research. And when I go into a band and I really start to find a love with them, I'm finding anything and everything I can about them. Right. And I go, oh, who is this guy? Dave Mustaine. Oh, he's no longer in the band anymore. Right. But, oh, he has a new band as well. So then that turns that opens the door to Megadeth. Probably. Yeah. This will be a funny little story, but I think my introduction to them came because I believe the intro music to MTV News used the bass riff from Peace Sells as sort of their intro music to MTV News. So every time I'd hear that, I was like, oh, I love that little lick. And then once I finally discovered that song, I'm like, oh my God. Okay, cool. I'm also watching Headbangers Ball at this point on MTV. So I'm also getting introduced to some more heavier bands. They had also started shifting away a little bit from hair metal into more heavier artists. So I'm thinking probably 88 to 90. That period for me became a lot. It was heavy music, period. whomever the artist would be, Anthrax, Slayer, Megadeth, Metallica, Pantera, they're all kind of coming out. And I just wanted more and more and more. As I got very similar to what you said, it's like a drug. Yeah, Testament also in there. I'm like, oh, I need to hear more of this. And I had a close friend, of course, who's a guitar player. So then we go way deep into like Yngwie and like Cacophony and Racer X and all of these like really guitar driven great bands that are in the sub genre. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a big discovery for me during those couple years, for sure. And waiting to hear
that's fascinating.
What's next from the one who sort of opened the door for me. So I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait. I'm hearing this talk that Metallica is going to come out with a record, but it's been a minute. I've listened to everything they've ever done now by this point, you know, even their little B-sides. You go and buy a B-side cassette and it would have like Bread Fan or something on there. There was a cover that they have done, or a Misfits cover or something like that. I'm like, oh my God, this is, you know, this is the best band in the world to me at this moment.
Yeah.
You know, and then the Black Album comes out. And I think I probably said, what the heck is this? What is this is, I'm used to 7-minute long songs like And Justice for All. Like, I'm like, this doesn't feel, it was heavy, I think, but it certainly felt like, wait a minute, are we aiming for the fences here?
But simpler.
Oh, absolutely simpler. And I think, I don't know where my frustration initially rose from that, or I was just getting to a point where I felt like, oh, you're getting one video after another now on MTV. What is going on? Or have you sold out? Like, did you sell out here? Like, what's happening?
Well, when you're younger, you take all that stuff really personally too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm like, what happened to my band? Like, what is this? You know, I'm like,
they got body snatched and
what is happening? And the sound, it was not thrash anymore. Right. If you're really thinking of Metallica as a thrash metal band, and I would say they would be, by that point, that's no longer in existence, really. You have heavier songs like Holier Than Thou, of course, that feel a little back to sort of what they had been doing. So that felt a little familiar.
But it's still really different.
Yeah, but you're hearing like Sad But True, or, some of those songs, again, like Wherever I May Roam, you're hearing a freaking sitar, and I'm going, okay, I think you jumped the shark, guys. But they were getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, And I think that's it. That's where I planted the flag. I'm like, no, this is not okay. You have definitely kidnapped the real Metallica, and I don't know who these guys are. I was really pissed off.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair. But that's also, there's probably a lesson in here. But I think, cause I'm younger than you. And so by the time that I get to Metallica, if I'm getting it freshman year, that's 2004. Yeah. So the Black Album's been out for like 13 years or whatever at that point.
Yeah.
And so for me, I did something very similar to what you did. I got my entry point, and then I went and found everything that I could, and was delighted that they had a huge back catalog for me to go experience. But to me, I'm taking it all at face value because it's all just there. It's all already part of the catalog. There is no, hey, this is new. What do you guys think? It's already like established. And so I didn't take it that way, although I was aware of the discourse, because as I started talking to friends and people who knew more, who had been into the band longer than I had, were there to tell me that the Black Album is their sellout album, or, this, that, and the other. I didn't pay too much mind to that, to be honest, because I thought the songs were cool. And I really like the more experimental stuff. You mentioned the sitar, and from your perspective, I see how that would be jarring. A lot of the bands that I was getting into around that time, like one of my favorite bands of all time actually is Avenged Sevenfold, very influenced by Metallica and Pantera and everybody else. But one of the things that I thought was so cool about that band when I got into them was how experimental they would be with different sounds. And so hearing that stuff is like, oh man, I didn't even know what a sitar was. That's so cool to put that into a metal song or whatever, you know. I mean, done properly, it adds a different aesthetic, a different energy, a different mystique or whatever to the song. It's like, oh, this sounds like, where's this going? You know? So that's so funny, you know, but I think maybe the lesson in that is that, you know, that album goes on to be of course, their highest selling album, which I'm sure didn't help I'm assuming it's their highest selling.
I would think so. Yeah.
And which I'm sure didn't help with the sellout record, you know, mentality from people.
Yeah.
But clearly people really resonated with it, and it's stood the test of time, but that was a big departure for them. And so it makes me wonder about, you know, the willingness to take a risk and do something different. And they're a great example because they've taken a lot of big risk, and some of them have gone on to be really great, like the Black Album, and some of them have been a disaster, you know, Saint Anger and, you know, some of that stuff in that period of time. So it's not like it always works out. Right. But you have to respect the balls to go out there and be like, yeah, you're all expecting 7 to 9 minute songs filled with guitar solos and all of these really unique parts strung together, really fast riffs and craziness. And we're going to go out and basically do our version of kind of the opposite of that. You know, it's going to be more, I don't know if people would agree with this, but I would say it's more in the AC/DC mentality, you know, kind of get to the point, strong, simple riffs, and well-constructed songs around guitars, bass, and drums. Like, that's basically it. Yeah. And you do get a little more than that, but it feels akin to me to something like an AC/DC kind of mentality, which is awesome. You know, when I think about it that way, I go, oh yeah, no, it makes total sense, you know?
I wanted to circle back because you mentioned Avenged, and I don't want to take us too far off topic because I do want to get to like the other three, but in comparison to sort of what I was saying about when you're anticipating this album, as a longtime Avenged Sevenfold fan, you're coming from, and again, I won't know their catalog in order, but you've had Nightmare, you've had a few of their earlier albums as well, and then you get Hail the King. And
that's exactly the same thing.
Complete departure from the maniacal.
No, it was.
You know, Petri dish that they're known for. It's a very straightforward album.
Even in production,
very much driven by a Black Album aesthetic. You know,
100%.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would say it that plainly, but I don't think they would disagree with that. I mean, I speak as if I know them, and I don't. But from the production and everything, it did the exact same progression. And you know, it's that record isn't my favorite from Avenged. Right. But I also really enjoy it. There's some great songs on that record. And so I mean, part of the lesson is, of course, be courageous, take a risk. I think the other part is that with enough time, the tapestry of the catalog comes together and you learn to appreciate it for what it is, even if it really jars you in the moment, because those old records don't go away, and God willing, they're going to continue to make more stuff. So if this one wasn't completely it for you, then hopefully in, you know, the next couple of years, you'll have something else to, you know, sink your teeth into. So I hope all my favorite bands continue to just do what they want to do, because I'll be damned if I know what I want, you know?
I think you have to keep challenging.
You think you do?
I think I'm not here to take back, you know, anything I initially shared. I hated the production of the album. Although I go back now and I have my own issues with Injustice for All because there's literally no bass guitar in it.
Yeah.
Even with the remaster, it still sounds like I'm still missing it. But that was the thing at the time. It didn't really matter. Everything's in the mid range, if you will. So, but I hated Bob Rock. I hated Dr. Feelgood from Motley Crue, which he produced. So I thought that was also a terrible album. And also a departure from the debauchery, even though it wasn't. It was just bombastic and too big. It just felt so big. And so I was already on a hate train for Bob Rock. So when I find out, oh my God, this idiot, and produces the Black Album, I'm like, great. Thanks, dude, for ruining another band. And I put all of the onus on Bob Rock for the departure of the band. I'm like, he's going in there and giving these guys drugs and making them believe that they need to have more fans than they do. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, I know that
like
sounds
Bob
stupid.
Rock's some kind of crazy cult leader.
Cult leader, yeah. He's Charles Manson for the rock bands, right? He's like, no, you must listen to me.
Yeah,
this
he's
is what we're gonna
brainwashed
do.
the band.
Take this, and then we're gonna bring sitar in. I promise it's gonna be badass. And they're like, okay, sounds good, Bob. We're doing it. But I'll go back again in my older self.
But that feels kind of naive in hindsight, doesn't it?
Totally, totally now. And again, while I'll still defend and say it is not my favorite album, I have to respect the fact that they had reached a point by Injustice for All where what else is there left to say in that world necessarily? At that point, I imagine that they're looking at it and going, we've done it. We have created the world of thrash metal and certainly brought it to a huge amount of audience. And we've done these intricate songs. So what else can we do that's a little different, right? And I think Bob comes in at a really pivotal time to say, we can beef up the sound to make it sound bigger than ever. We can approach the production of your music in a different way that just sounds huge. And let's simplify the songs. Get your message out in a shorter amount of time because radio obviously would be able to play a 3.5 or 4 minute long song as opposed to a 7.5 minute opus. So do you want to reach more fans of your music? And then they go back like you did and discover the great, library material that came before it. So Bob's a genius in that way. And I have to respect that regardless of whether I feel like the production is good or bad. Yeah. In hindsight, I think it's an incredibly smart move on their behalf. They gain an enormous fan base that has carried them for the next 25, 30 years and allowed them the grace to be able to make interesting, different albums, take different risks, good or bad. But their sound certainly evolved from that moment on.
I would have to assume too that losing a bandmate has a big influence on figuring out what you want to do next because I mean, I don't enjoy putting myself in that headspace, but if I was going to for a second, it's like you feel pretty lost, especially with someone who is such a contributor like Cliff. And this does align really well with Avenged, losing Jimmy. They kind of go out, they do Nightmare, which Jimmy had started with them. They had all these ideas. And so that next record after the passing for both these bands is kind of like almost a take to the nth degree the thing that you've been doing to sort of like see it through. And then after that, picking up the pieces and going, what the hell is next? Like, are we really supposed to just go out and be the same band? Like, how could we even do that? Right. I would assume taking Bob Rock out of the equation that Metallica probably was in a place of going, something's got to give here, and something's got to change in order for this to feel right again, or hopefully feel right again.
And Jason's already there at that point. But again, there was often argue, I think, and again, it's maybe a misquoting too, but I know Newsted had joined the band and Injustice for All. Many of those songs, I believe, have been written with Cliff or around the time prior to his passing. And Thus,
that could be. I'm not sure.
And again, Jason's basically coming on to do the tour with them at that point. But again, they've still, the train keeps moving. And as your point, at some point, they have to kind of slow down and go, okay, what now? We've given everything in the kitchen sink to sort of the thing that we've been doing. But we do have to reckon with that and decide, like, how do we go? What do we do next? And what's it going to be? Right.
Yeah. Where from here?
Yeah.
Totally.
I want to talk about
I have an
Rust.
idea.
Oh, but go ahead. Sorry. Yeah. What's your idea?
I was just thinking it might be interesting. We don't have to do this, but it might be fun for you and I to list in opposite orders of each other. Like you share your top album from that time.
Okay.
And then I do my least favorite. And then we work through that way. Because I wonder how much they align or don't. It might turn into some arguments there, which could be kind of entertaining.
So we're talking about those 4 records in particular? Or are you talking about Metallica
I
only?
would assume.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. I'm thinking those bands because, from the conversation standpoint, Metallica sounds like it was both of our entry point into these 4 bands. But then how you would end up, in hindsight, kind of ranking those albums. And I don't even exactly know what my for sure ranking would be, but I do know what all my thoughts were getting into each one of those bands, because some of them I got right away, like Metallica.
Yeah.
Others took me a long time. I guess we'll get into that. And then others never became a favorite for me.
Right.
So
I can share that.
Out of those 4, which one's going to be your favorite, you think?
Rust in Peace, without a doubt.
Rust in Peace. Sure.
That's a masterpiece album. And I think it's hard for anyone who loves that genre to argue that. I would really challenge that it, front to back, there's not a mistake there. It's carefully thought out. I think from Dave's perspective and all the interviews I've watched from him afterwards, like the remaster or the 20th anniversary and so forth as well, he just said it's untouchable. He uses that quote, it's untouchable record. Yeah. But it's also, even for him, he admittedly says it's a record that I don't even know if I could do it again. Like I don't, and nor do I want to, but I don't know. I didn't know that I had the capacity to be able to do that at that moment. I really pushed myself, and having Marty join the band really took and created a record that is just hard to, like, hearing people try and do covers of anything like Tornado of Souls or something. Can you imagine? Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Good luck. Yeah.
Somehow people do it.
Of course. Somehow. And they do. And there's great bands that have come from them. But that, again, is a staple that should not be ignored in regards to how, in my opinion, how perfect it is, top to bottom. They did not move away from their style. But again, if they're a little bit behind the curve of Metallica, where if Metallica is seeing the vision and saying, reading the tea leaves and going, we need to change because we've reached a pinnacle in our career, our apex with the style of music that we have. What's next for us? That is the apex for Megadeth. And then Countdown to Extinction becomes sort of the Black Album for Megadeth as well, where he's like, no, we can tighten up and write melody. We can focus on melody. Yeah. It doesn't have to be these incredibly...
Countdown's a great record too.
Yeah. There's 50 riffs packed into a single song. And, you know, I mean, if you go to Holy Wars on Rust in Peace, just think about all the different riffs in there. There's at least 5 or 6 signature riffs that are happening in that song.
Totally.
And he goes from that to something that's very somewhat simplistic, like Symphony of Destruction. And that becomes sort of your Enter Sandman, if you will. And so anyway, rewinding, Rust in Peace, number 1 for me, hands down. The second choice here and third are going to be a little challenging for me, but I'll explain my thought behind it.
That's the tough part, is the middle.
Yeah. Seasons in the Abyss. I like Slayer, but I will tell you that Rain and Blood and South of Heaven have incredibly great songs. Rain and Blood, a super great thrash metal album, period.
Yeah.
Really great, super raw. It sounds like they're in a garage. The production of it sounds raw and visceral. It's one of the heaviest things you hear. When you hear that, like Angel of Death, you're like, whoa, this is even heavier than anything else I've ever heard. Tom's vocal is just like, just like someone just screaming in your face. So that's blood curdling to me. But they found, what's next for us? We've already done that. We can't really do that again. South of Heaven slows down. They start finding grooves and so forth as well. And then by the time you sort of get to Seasons in the Abyss, they're like, we're going to take our songwriting and stuff to a little bit of a different place. And so there's heavier songs like War Ensemble. There's slower songs on there. Again, like Seasons in the Abyss is an example. Their songwriting, their lyric writing, all changes, but the production quality and everything still feels very true. So at the time, again, when I'm hearing these albums, I'm like, they aren't changing for anybody. They're just doubling down on what they do well, and they know who they are. They have an identity, and they're kind of sticking to it while still evolving a little bit in their sound. Cowboys from Hell, while a phenomenal album, is, of course, not my favorite record from Pantera. I think Vulgar Display and Far Beyond Driven are the albums to me
but
that
it's
are
also
like
earlier in their career, though.
So they're still coming out of this
some of these other bands.
Yeah, it's hard rock. They were a hard rock band or a hair band, if you will. Yeah, that decided they wanted to do something completely
still
different.
A lot of that.
And so in Phil's singing,
Cowboys,
you can still hear it, like the high notes he hits on Cemetery Gates and sort of all these things that he's doing.
Yeah, some of the other songs too.
Yeah, so you're still getting these little tastes of like him almost being like Rob Halford a little bit.
Oh, sure.
You know, touching on that sort of Judas Priest influence that they have in there, which a lot of people don't necessarily draw into Pantera, but I find in Phil singing, particularly on that album, it's very Judas Priest-like to me.
Yeah.
So I think if I'm going to go in the second and third, personally, I'm going to take Seasons in the Abyss because I do feel front to back that's an incredible album for Slayer, particularly, and for fans of Slayer. That's also polarizing. Because you either like that band or you don't. Mostly. Because they either scare the shit out of you with what they, their sort of imagery and who they are and what they look like, or what they wanted to focus on musically, or you just go, I'm way into that and I'm way into what they do. And I wouldn't say that I'm a huge fan of all of their music, but that one particularly, at that moment in time in my life, I really connected with. And particularly, they're, again, very similar to Metallica, sort of their first 3 or 4 albums led me to that place where I'm like, this is great. Cowboys from Hell, probably third for me, just because I was blown away with the entirety of that band. They come, when I hear that record, somewhat fully realized, like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
I had no understanding of what they had done before, some of the other music prior to that. So when I'm introduced to that record, I'm like, holy crap, this is pretty heavy.
Yeah.
Black Album, I think I still put that there in my fourth. But like I said, I listened to it again the other day, front to back.
You only have 4 choices. I mean, you could put it at number 5 and just skip number 4 if you wanted. Hater.
Yeah. I think, and I know on the list of it, it's probably people would certainly argue, but this is just one man's opinion of that. Yeah. And I think fourth, but again, with a lot of respect and understanding of why that album is what it is. And I myself told you the other day when we were on the phone, like, I know all the lyrics to that album. So clearly I've listened and studied it and tried to understand why other people still love it 20 years later, 30 years later.
Right.
When someone goes, oh my God, the Black Album is one of the best Metallica albums ever, rather than saying, fuck you, you moron, I'm going to go back and say, okay, I'm going to listen to it again just because maybe I'm missing something. And I often find when I do that, I find a song that I'm like, oh, that was actually a really good song. Like A Wolf of Man. You talked about that. That's a great tune. It's a great tune, you know, but that's my rank from 1 to 4.
Yeah. Huh. Man, so interesting. Okay. I'm going to go from worst to best.
Okay.
My last place is easy. Slayer.
Yeah.
I don't hate Slayer. In fact, I like Slayer. Slayer was the most acquired taste for me. And even now, Slayer's not a band that I listen to all the time.
Right.
I'm not going to shut it off if it comes on, but they never really got their claws in me like the other bands did. And I don't know exactly why that is. I always thought the music was cool.
It's the Holy Spirit that's still deep within you that's fought off there. It's your church. It's your upbringing in church. That's it.
It's really not, because I was listening to plenty other, lots of other evil shit. Let's call it.
Right.
So it wasn't that. Honestly, what I think it was is the vocals for Slayer in general are not my taste.
Yeah.
And it's the same problem actually that I had with Megadeth early on. Megadeth was an acquired taste for me. I'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, Slayer, Seasons in the Abyss was not a big record for me. I have a lot of respect for them being part of the Big Four. The hits are great. But for some reason, for someone who doesn't listen to lyrics as much as he should, which is definitely me, it's still really important to me that the timbre or the texture of the voice is still a really important factor to me as an instrument. And there are certain singers that I really gravitate toward and others that I just struggle with endlessly. And so Slayer would fall into that latter category for me, where it was hard for me to get into them because I just never jived with the vocals, really.
Yeah.
They always struck me as like kind of cheesy. I'm sure that's going to piss off a lot of people, me saying that, because there is an honesty to it. And as you described, like really raw, really visceral, really on purpose, not polished. You know, it's meant to be what it is.
It's like Lemmy
and I
from
respect
Motorhead.
It for that.
Like, think about Lemmy.
But I think even Lemmy's a better singer.
Wow.
Like, for sure. Like, I actually like Motorhead's vocals.
I do.
Don't ask me how it makes sense. Don't ask me how it makes sense. I couldn't explain it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that band comes at number 4 for me.
Okay. Fair.
Now the rest of them, it kind of depends on how I want to define it, because if I'm thinking of what was most impactful to me when I first got into it versus maybe how I feel about them now, I'm going to go with how I feel about them now, actually.
Okay.
I'm going to say that I'm going to say Cowboys from Hell comes next.
And third.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is hard for me because honestly, it's a toss up in the 2 and 3 spots. I would say, I would say Cowboys from Hell, which hurts me because unlike Slayer, I really, really love that record.
Oh yeah, totally.
And that band.
Yeah.
I agree with you that their best work came later, but man, Domination might be my all-time favorite Pantera song and has been since I first heard it.
Primal Concrete Sledge, certainly up there, and to me in my top 5 as well. That's such a great
And there's so many
riff.
other really cool songs on there. Oh, totally. I remember, for anyone who hasn't seen it, go on YouTube right now and find it. But there is a video of, you would probably know what the concert was more than me. But I think it's around the time that record would have come out. So it's like 91, maybe 92. And they ended up in Moscow. So they did that huge show in Russia. I think Metallica was there too, and probably some other bands. There was like 1 million people. I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think they actually had 1 million people at that show. Yeah. And Pantera comes out and just starts ripping Domination. Dude, even thinking about it right now, it gives me chills. Like, it is one of the coolest things ever. I'm like, how could you not love this band? I mean, Dime's out there and everybody just losing their mind on stage, windmilling their hair and ripping it. And everyone in the crowd is also losing their mind. You got people, it looks like a country going to war, basically.
Yes.
But it's Pantera.
Yeah.
And man, that is, as people say, that lives in my head rent free, and comes up on a regular basis when I think about just like some of the coolest things I've ever seen. I wish I could have been in there in person, but getting to go back and watch that video, that is like one of the coolest things ever. So yeah, I think Cowboys from Hell ranks up there. I got into them also in high school, and I got into them all out of order, which is why it's hard for me to even pick, because it's still during that same time frame where like I don't just have the records on hand.
Right.
I'm not listening to them in the right track order. I'm listening to different songs from different albums. They're all just mixed together as like one big Pantera soup, basically.
Yes.
And so, and maybe that's why it's hard for me to rank it at number 3, because I want to rank it higher, but I know based on the songs on that actual record, that's probably where it belongs. But that guitar playing and Phil's vocals, like that's a band I got right away from the vocals. Even with some of his stuff that, as you described it, kind of Halford-esque. No one else sounds like him.
No,
not really.
Not really.
You know, other people can do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But he is one of a kind.
Yep.
And there's just something about his delivery that is incredible. And in prepping for this podcast, I was listening to that record again with the lyrics up, and just thinking about how it didn't occur to me as much until recently how unique because he writes good lyrics anyway, but how uniquely his delivery ends up layering those lyrics on top of the riffs that are happening. And it's a little more nuanced than I would have given it credit for just from memory.
Yeah.
But he has to be given a lot of credit for making it all work, because he takes those really great tunes and then puts this really kind of savage type vocal on top of it with these lyrics that are clearly coming from an important place for him. Unlike bands of, let's say, maybe a little bit before that era, let's say like, 80s for sure. So much metal is written from, I'm thinking like, for some reason Dio is coming to mind, but you have this kind of like
cinematic or
the Dungeon Wizard, and the magic throughout the lands and all this kind of thing, right? Which is cool. There's a place for that. I'm not talking shit on that. But it came from this very almost fantasy world influence in metal that existed, and all the bands we're talking about today don't fit into that. But you can tell that, especially, at least I feel like I can tell that Phil's lyrics come from a very real place. Because even like contrasted with Metallica, and we'll use the Black Album because that's what we're talking about, all those songs are kind of themed around, they don't feel very personal. They're well written and they're about specific things. Like they're focused. You understand what the songs are about.
Yeah.
But there's still a little more, they don't necessarily feel like James is revealing anything about himself necessarily on that record. Is more like speaking out to other people as opposed to speaking about himself. And I know that not all of Cowboys from Hell is like some, I don't know, like
introspective diary.
Phil's diary.
Right.
But it felt like they were coming from a place that had a lot more genuine anger behind it and a lot more fresh emotion in regards to what he's talking about. And so I connected with that a lot. I would put in my second place the Black Album. I think it belongs there in a lot of places in my head. It belongs there because of the influence that it's had on me. I've listened to that one way more than I've listened to any of the others. It's not even close. I've always loved the production of that album. To me, that is a masterclass on how you take a standard sort of, I say standard, right? But like how you take a radio type rock song and make it sound as heavy as possible. I love the drum sound on that album.
Many do.
And I know those kind of things have been used too much now. And I think that's why most people are critical of it, is because I think it was so influential in the culture that, and people may or may not notice this, but my take is it was so influential in the culture that it ended up seeping into pretty much everybody's production style. Everyone is trying to replicate those kinds of things. And I think that's what takes away from it. It's not that it's not great. I think a lot of people just got tired of that kind of thing because it was so big. You know, it's like almost any band, you know, you'll love a band when they're coming out. And then if the song gets too much radio play, then all of a sudden it's natural if you were early on to be like, maybe this wasn't as good as I thought it was, or I'm just tired of it. It's too much of a good thing. I think the Black Album suffers from that. I think it suffers from too much of a good thing, which is not their fault. But no, I think the way that it's produced, the focus of the songs, even though I prefer early Metallica, and as I said, Ride the Lightning is my favorite record, and then Master. So clearly I love the more progressive Metallica. I love the more garage sound. In my mind, in my heart, when I hear Metallica, that is how I perceive them, is as if it was on Ride the Lightning. But still, it's a phenomenal album, and has stuck with me for a long time. So it's got to be up there. Yeah. And then that leaves what would have been a huge surprise for me, even probably a few years ago. But Megadeth is the sleeper that ends up in first place on this one. I would not have said that not too long ago. I remember in high school getting into Metallica, of course, being the entry point. And then so anyone who knows anything is immediately saying, oh, well, if you like Metallica, then you must love Megadeth. Or I guess it was a little more polarized than that in high school. There were some people who would be like, oh, okay, well, then what do you think of Megadeth? If you're a Metallica fan, are you someone who hates Megadeth? You like you got to choose a side, kind of.
Yeah, it was very much like that for me. Yeah.
Pick your team. We're going to meet you after school in the parking lot. Like, choose wisely.
I think that was also created a lot by Dave's feelings about it early on, being kicked out of the band.
I'm sure.
You know,
I'm sure
he's like, no, we're coming with a vengeance. So perhaps he helped to kind of fuel some of that.
That was, I mean, the way that I have always understood it from him is that was conscious. Like he was trying to basically like, it's like a bad breakup. Like, you know, I'll show them I'm going to get 10 times hotter and I'm going to get fit. I'm going to, I'm going to find someone better looking to make them, whatever. Right.
Right. Whatever it is.
Yeah. And probably why there were so many guitar players that he hired through that band, right? Is like, I got to have the hottest hot shit on this album.
Yep.
So I can respect that. But I remember hearing Megadeth early and thinking, oh man, I really wish I liked this more. I was like, I was so confused by it for some reason. Cause I'm like, I feel like I'm supposed to like this, but for some reason I can't get into it. And it was Dave singing. Dave was an acquired taste for me. And I remember people saying like how much they loved it. I'm like, I must just be missing something. Like what? How am I not getting this? Like, he's not good, right? Like, are y'all just pretending like you like the other stuff so much that it outweighs the fact that he's not very good at singing? Yeah. And I'm very happy to eat my words at this point, because that was the limitations of my taste at that point, People
still address it though.
Yeah.
I think
do they?
I think I feel like I just sent a meme that I found the other day. It's like a picture of like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his ripped biggest, right? I think, or some type of,
sure.
I mean, it might not have been him, but it certainly looked like him.
Yeah.
Where it's shredded, right? And it says, it's got Megadeth at the top, this like Megadeth. And it says there's split screen. So one is Arnold just ripped, like pumping iron kind of thing. And at the bottom of it says music. And then on the opposite side, it's a picture of Beavis. And it says vocals. So,
yeah.
And it's kind of, but that addresses exactly the acquired taste. And I agree with you. Like, but I absolutely love his style of singing now. It's totally grown on me in a great way.
It took me until, what was that album? So the thing that I've noticed that I do this with bands, anytime there's a band that I've been told by people that I trust that you should check this out. Mm-hmm. And let's say that I have, and it didn't click for me. Mm-hmm. Anytime I see a band like that come out with a new album, I always try to check it out, because what I've noticed about me is that a lot of times if I can get something when it's new and everyone's getting into it, and it can help me unlock the band, then I can go back with a new appreciation. Mm-hmm. But I struggle sometimes to jump in the middle of a catalog or going back to the very beginning. I don't know why. So that happened for me. Like, whatever the first album that they had Chris Broderick on, I wish I could, Endgame? Or, that sounds wrong. Would have been around like 2007, 2008. I remember they came out with a record that I got into, and I was like, oh, I'm kind of getting it now. And then being able to go back, and it was like a switch flipped in my brain where all of a sudden Dave's voice was not annoying to me. It wasn't weird. It was exactly what that band needed. It was so perfect. And I thought, man, how did I feel that way for so long? And I felt that way about other bands too. Tom Petty's a good example of like maybe probably my favorite songwriter of all time. And one of my favorite bands, the Heartbreakers, and his solo stuff too, which basically is just the Heartbreakers.
Yep.
But that was a band that I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't give up on that and that I eventually found it, because what a loss in my life if I never find Tom Petty, and certainly a loss in my life if I don't get into Megadeth, because there's so much great music in their catalog. And so if I have to look at this list from a creativity and delivering on expectations and like all these records stand the test of time, but that's where now at this point in my life, I give the edge to Rust. Because it's hard to go back and listen to it and not just be blown away even still.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It just, I also have to think about, and we've talked often about this too, like it's such an onslaught of riffage that, and I say this all the time, like
how do you even keep up?
Yeah.
How does that band not just sound like a sloppy mess live? Like how can 4 or 5 people lock in for 2.5 hours and just rip that shit that tight? I mean, I've seen them do it. I've seen them do it in person.
Yeah. Many times.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Absolutely unbelievable.
It's a machine. And watching Dave being able to...
It shouldn't be possible.
I think what people... And I don't know, maybe not. Maybe a lot of people really do. I think reading some of the Reddit threads and stuff when I was going back to this record as well, like there's a lot of people that are just like, if anyone has any negative thing to say about Dave, watch them play live and watch them do any of those songs from that record.
Shove it up your ass.
Yeah. And they're like, the case is closed. Like to be able to still play all of those things. Like what was the one? Oh, Tornado of Souls. Like hearing that and then hearing him play that lick while singing a pretty complex type of verse and still being able to keep that riff going. and not get off the rails with it is
that's not
insane.
To mention, and not that it should be a factor in the ranking or whatever, and it's all subjective.
Yeah.
But that's not even to take into account that over the years, like Dave's arm basically didn't work.
Yeah.
Like he's had to, from an injury, like I think he had a bowling injury of all things that basically completely ruined his hand. So he had to relearn from scratch how to play guitar.
Yeah.
So it's not like he just spent all those years getting up to that point and then he was able to like maintain. No. And it hasn't even been once. He's had multiple injuries that have set him back and forced him to relearn things. Yeah. I can't even wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
So he's playing it and singing it. He's doing it perfectly. And he's had to start from scratch several times to keep it going. Yeah. I mean, if that's not inspiring as all hell, like I don't know what is.
Yeah.
You know, to be able to just say, I will not be defeated. I don't care. Like
that's what I mean.
So driven.
The sheer, drive and tenacity for him to continue to keep pushing himself. And again, throughout their career, even post Rust in Peace, yes, they have definitely dabbled in, let's try to focus on a more commercial record or simplified song structure that focuses more on melody and things like that. Like you hear that throughout.
Yeah, you got to mix it up.
What I'd like to kind of come back to, particularly now, and I say not to leave Slayer or Pantera out of that, but I think it's more because these two bands are still actively going. A few lineup changes here and there, but they're still actively going. But what's been interesting about it is a bit of a, dare I say, a return to form. So they've almost kind of come full circle. If you think about Metallica's last two albums, the 72 Seasons and then going back to Hardwired, and even like Dystopia and the sort of the last album, I can't think of the name of it right now, for Megadeth, it has been a bit of a return back to their really heavy sort of thrash influenced roots, where you're not finding a ton of balladry or slower songs, perhaps. Why do you think that is? Why do you think, right? Because they, again, at that moment when we talked about, they made their statement, they felt like at that moment in time, they've said all they can say at that particular frame. They decide to change. They do something completely more different for them, for sure, but definitely more accessible, if you will. And then over the course of probably the next 20 years or so, they decided, you know what? I don't know if it's a nostalgia or if it's just like I sort of miss being able to write very hard to play, intricate songs. They seem to have returned to some of that, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I'm glad that they have, especially Metallica. Megadeth has never lost me in the way that Metallica has through their career.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
There are some Metallica records I just don't listen to.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put any Megadeth records in that list of like, I just skip it every time. I don't know. Maybe it's probably partially like old becomes new again.
Maybe.
But I also think that, well, and you think about the first Metallica record comes out in like 83 or something.
Yeah, probably. I'm going to be off on that day, but probably somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're like 40 years or whatever, you know, from the first one. But I would also think that style never leaves you as an artist necessarily, you know, and for a band like Metallica, there ended up being other detours that they chose to want to take. But I don't know that they ever set out within themselves to say, we're never coming back to this.
Right.
Like we're leaving it all behind, you know? So I think some of it is just as a fan being patient and waiting to hear what the band has for you and when they're ready to come back. Because if you're going to do something, it's got to feel authentic to you. If you feel tired of it or... Because like anything, I mean... And art can certainly be this way. If something gets too repetitive, like you could keep making it, but you're making things that are like 1 degree different or one shade on the Pantone scale different. And so you're like, is it different? Yeah. I mean, technically in a laboratory, it's different.
Right.
But does it really feel different?
Yeah.
And so if you're not feeling inspired, or you feel like maybe you are at risk of just kind of rewriting the same thing over and over again, I can understand why bands would need to take a break, and why you can't necessarily put a timer on how long it's going to take for you to feel refreshed to go back.
Yeah.
Or for some bands, it never happens. But Hardwired was a great record. Oh my God, that one was awesome. Yeah. As a fan, it felt so nice to be able to hear a modern production of Metallica with a lot of the same excitement that you would get from listening to older Metallica.
Yeah.
Some of those songs are so good.
I loved hearing James, because they did that whole sort of video behind the scenes of them putting it together. And him talking about like, hold up, I got to get back into chugga shape, with his left hand or whatever, or right hand. Yeah. Just being able to get some of the aggressiveness back in playing in that way. Because if you don't do it a lot, or you've changed sort of your way of going to more simplistic or more focused riffs, you decide like, okay, no, I'm going to go back to playing something that's like something super fast and crazy. You're like, oh crap, I need to get my hand back in shape. I'm not ready for this right now. I want to do this, but my hand's not ready yet. So I got to get back into physical shape to be able to produce something that I really hear in my head. Yeah, I want to go back to doing some of that stuff.
And I would assume his comment on that probably was more about just getting in shape for the tour.
I'm certain.
Because it's not like they've stopped playing any of that old catalog stuff, on tour.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, fair point is it takes a different mentality. It takes, and some of that could be part of it too, right? Is like who you are how old is James in those early records? I mean, I'm sure he's in his 20s.
Yeah, I gotta be early 20s.
The person that
probably.
You are then versus the person he is now, it might feel disingenuous at times to try to write like you would have written when you were basically still a kid. It's hard to say. I'm sure there's a lot of factors in there, but that's an interesting question.
Yeah. My other one I was thinking about just now is like, when you have bands, I think about, because obviously they continue to listen to new bands, to the evolution of bands that fall within their genre, people that have come up and being influenced by them, taken their own path. Like if you're like Lamb of God or Avenged or Mastodon, these are bands that certainly have come up probably listening to some of all of these bands that we've talked about, but have taken their own journey and their own style, their own production, their own things. I wonder if any of them probably look at this. I don't know if I would or not. I can't say, because I've obviously not been to that point. Neither of us have been to the point of epic success and huge fandom. Yeah. And then realizing like, ooh, do people want us to do that thing? Because they're all getting turned on by the, again, Lamb of God. That's a great example. They're superbly great musicians. Heavy. So, or if you're Megadeth, great are you band. Looking at that and going, whew, okay, I'm going to go on tour with these guys. I got to bring it. Of course they know that they can. And of course they're going to bring it, and people are certainly there to see them, but you also hear them. You're sitting on side stage hearing them every night and going, oh, okay, this is a good challenge. It's a good, healthy challenge, good, healthy competition for me to go back and go, okay, I want to continue to keep writing stuff that still pushes me, that still challenges me. Because you have these other bands that have come up that are younger, that love you, that love your work, but they're also doing something that's visceral and intricate and difficult to play. So I don't know. I don't know if you ever get influenced by those kind of things. If it's too much like headiness, you get into your head and go, man, I don't know if we can do a record like Mastodon,
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? We still have to do our own thing, but it's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do those things kind of weigh heavy in you when you're going into the studio writing your next record? Do you think about that kind of stuff, or you just go, fuck it, we're just going to do us and do the best we can?
I'm sure a lot of that comes down to personality. Some people struggle with those kind of things more than others. Something tells me Dave has probably never given a shit about that. And I could be totally wrong, but he seems like someone who has always been very confident in what he wants to bring to the table, his vision, and realizing that all those other things that may appear as a challenge now were spawned from his own brainchild, right? Like if Megadeth doesn't exist, does Lamb of God exist even? Like maybe, you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm just talking shit, but but I don't know. I'm sure it's different for everybody. You wouldn't be human if you didn't feel some weight of expectations. And so that could even be against yourself, right? Like you go out, you have a massive success, then you go, ooh, well, I mean, that huge song that everyone expects that to be our thing now was maybe just one aspect of what I wanted to do. But now maybe I feel like, okay, well, if I'm going to continue the success and people expect this from me. And I would assume that, you know, going on tour or hearing what other people are doing in the genre has got to inspire you on some level. It's got to give you some ideas of, you know, we might not be able to do that the way that they do, but that does make me think that some of that, the ethos behind what they're doing might really fit in well with the project that we're doing. I mean, that's how we work. Yeah. You know, we get inspired by artists that we love, and then we try to figure out, okay, how could we, you know, we're not ever going to sound like those bands. Right. But how can we incorporate a little bit of the drama of Ghost, or, you know, the heaviness of Metallica, or the, I don't know, like we can name off a million influences across a million genres, but just trying to challenge yourself based on things that really connect with you. And trying to incorporate that in. That's always been a part of how I've made stuff. I don't know if that's how those guys work or not. You know, they may have come from an era where they're just totally trusting their own gut all the time. Yeah. But I don't think that's true either, because I mean, you can see how many covers that Metallica does and how many bands that they really, really, really love that they talk about all the time. That either came before them or who were maybe, you know, coming up around the same time they were coming up. Yeah. And so I would assume that, like, you know, Misfits still exist as an influence for Metallica or whatever, right? Motorhead, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Motorhead,
all of those bands, I think, and I think they, you know,
you got Lulu.
Yeah. But I do agree. Like, I think, you know, a lot of those bands that even the bands that they bring on tour with them now, I think they have a genuine mutual love of one another, you know, and they go, I love your music. I love what you do. It's so incredible to see you continue to do this. And for the other artists, they're like, thank you so much. You know, this is what a great opportunity to be able to, you know, play alongside you, really reach out to your fan base. You know, we believe that they would love our music just as much, or maybe that turns them on to something new. So I think there's smart choices that are being made now when people go out on tour, especially those bands, Megadeth, Pantera, Slayer retired, but, you know, I know that they're picking bands that, to me, would further the genre, that helps to continue to create new audiences and new appreciation. Some people come for those opening bands and stay around to listen, maybe because they have a good understanding of Metallica or Megadeth or Pantera or Slayer or whomever. And they end up loving and falling in love with those bands in a similar way that we did. Right. So
yeah, 100%. And they're mutually beneficial, right? Because I'm thinking about last time I saw Megadeth was Metal Tour of the Year. So you've got Megadeth, and then the supporting acts were Trivium, Lamb of God and Amon Amarth, I think. And so you've got bands who span several decades apart from each other. So, the old metal heads are coming in to see Megadeth, and then they're going to see these newer bands and maybe find something they love. And those newer bands are going to bring in younger fans who are going to go, oh my God, I had no idea Megadeth was the GOAT or whatever.
Right.
So I would assume those things really benefit each other. They give each other a stage or a light to be shown under. Damn, that was a great concert too. Every band was so good.
Yeah, you kind of like, holy moly, right? You're just getting pummeled for 5 hours from just incredible proficiency.
Getting your ass beat.
Yes. musically speaking, just getting whooped.
Yeah.
But what a great thing to be able to do. I don't know, to kind of put a bow tie on all of it. These are four artists that we, have had some impact to us at different points in time. 4 albums, I think, that really speak to many fans of these bands or of the genres that they represent as sort of apex moments in their career. And it really does just show love and appreciation to what they do, regardless of whether in the moment hearing them, I have, or you may have an opposing reaction to what I feel now or what we may feel now.
Yeah.
It's undeniable that the levity that they bring with that, all of those records at some point have vastly influenced a whole new legion of metal fans and people that are still probably in their garage, like you and I, figuring out what their next thing's going to be, but having those posters and those tours that they've seen as sort of a way to kind of create their own path forward. So I think hats off to all of them. We obviously have a lot of respect and adoration for these bands and certainly appreciate those contributions,
Yeah, maybe next we continue through the 90s and we grab some of the grunge bands or something.
Oh,
because there are so many different ones that we could do across so many genres. It's fun to reflect on these things and just think about what they've meant to you and then how your perspective has changed. I think that is one of the more unique things. Yeah. It's like it's a really good thing that taste can evolve. Yeah. And that you don't stay the same person forever,
It's like somebody asking you. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, there's those people who find their music in high school and then that's all it ever is. That's all that ever exists in their world, for the rest of their lives. I'm grateful to not be one of those people. I still love the music that I found in high school, as everyone does. That's important stuff for your life.
Yeah.
You'll always keep that. But also to be able to allow your taste to change, to grow, to evolve, to find new things. I used to be a hater about anything that wasn't in a box of what I thought I liked.
Same.
And then eventually you start realizing that the only person who loses with that mentality is you, because you end up missing out on so many great things that you wouldn't have found otherwise if you weren't willing to be kind of humble and maybe give it a second shot or second try.
Right.
To venture into something that normally wouldn't be your thing.
Right.
But no risk, no reward, right? If you're not willing to stop spinning, the Black Album to go listen to something else, then you're never going to find anything else. You know?
I think for both of us, it would be funny, if anybody out there listening to our podcast would be curious about what our randomized music selection would be based on our tastes. It would be no surprise to get a Trivium or Lamb of God followed by Dua Lipa. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So that's exactly right.
It would absolutely happen. And that would be okay, So
I love Dua. I'm not afraid.
Nope.
I'm not ashamed.
Nope. Not at all. We're gonna end a metal conversation with Dua Lipa. I think that's fantastic. What a great place to say.
Hey, why not?
Why not? You know.
Yeah.
But that just goes to show, like, we end up just as musicians and lovers of music, we have a wide palette, and I think you're right. Saying
if it's
yes,
good, it's good.
Yeah.
If it's good, it's good. That's all that needs to matter. It doesn't need to matter what other people think about it. It doesn't matter how popular a band is.
Yeah.
Or how maybe on paper they look like opposites. If it's good, it's good. We all win if it's good.
Yeah.
So we just need more people to make more good shit, and everything's peachy.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Take us home.
Are we wrapping up here then?
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. All right. So if you made it this far, thank you. We appreciate you listening.
Yes.
If you want to hear more from us, you want to get in contact with us, learn more about the show, anything like that. Of course, all of our episodes are posted, but you can find us at thesonicalchemy.com. So that's our website. You can also find us so far we're only on YouTube and Twitter, just to keep things simple. If you're hearing this in the future, maybe we've expanded, but the same tagline, the Sonic Alchemy, you'll find us there. I guess it's not Twitter anymore. It's X. But if you find us on there, that's a really great way to ask questions. If you have something that you want us to put on the show, or, you want to give us feedback or just stay connected to the stuff that we're doing. Lots more coming.
Oh yeah.
Some really big change coming in our lives, some new projects coming out, all kinds of stuff. So it's not slowing down from here. There will only be more, and we look forward to taking you all on the journey with us. So stay tuned, and we'll have our next episode out shortly. Anything I missed? I need a script for this part, but
just thanks to our sponsors, which is us. So we're sponsoring this. So if you love us and you like us and you want to give us money, we're not going to say no. So
that's true. Our current sponsor is the Justin Webster Bank of America account.
Yes. Yes. Send all donations and love to his personal bank account. He'll be happy to give you all those details. If
no, I just meant that's our current one.
Oh,
that's what's supporting this podcast as of right now. Yeah. Yes. If you want to send it to my bank account, you can cut to the chase.
Yeah. Just cut right to it.
No. We'll put up all the different ways to support us on our website. So be sure to pop over there.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. Stay tuned for the next one. Peace and love.
Absolutely. Later.